This is not a movie or some fairy tale. This is the life of a trader in its purest form. Sometimes it gets really rough and tough, but some days are good too. A man walks into a cloakroom. It's a cold Thursday afternoon in Manhattan, and the Sherry Netherland Hotel is exactly the kind of place that man used to own. Not literally. He never owned the hotel. But back in 29, he could have bought it with the change in his coat pocket and not felt the difference. He removes his hat. He hangs it on the rack. He sits down on a wooden chair. And then he places a Colt Woodsman .22 caliber pistol against his right temple. This man is 63 years old. His hands are steady. He has done this before, not the act itself, but the preparation. He has always been meticulous. He has always planned his entries with surgical precision. He pulls the trigger. And Jesse Livermore, the man who made $100 million in a single year, the man who broke the 1907 panic, the man J.P. Morgan personally begged to stop selling, the man who was banned from every gambling parlor in Boston before he could legally drink, ceases to exist. Now, I want you to sit with that for a moment. I want you to sit with it because if you are watching this channel, if you found your way to losing traders' psychology, you already know something that most people don't. You know that the distance between God mode and zero is not measured in dollars. It is measured in something else entirely. Something that ate Jesse Livermore alive from the inside out. Something that doesn't show up on a balance sheet. Something that, if you don't learn to recognize it, will do the exact same thing to you. My name is not important. The channel is Losing Traders Psychology. We do not celebrate wins here. Wins are easy. Wins are cheap. Wins lie to you. We study the losses. Because the losses tell the truth. And the truth about Jesse Livermore is this. He was not murdered by the market. He was not ruined by bad trades. He was not a victim of circumstance or bad luck or the machinations of men more powerful than himself. Jesse Livermore committed suicide because he spent 40 years conquering every external enemy and never learned how to face the one inside his own head. Today, we are going to walk through his entire arc. From the bucket shops of Boston to the penthouses of Fifth Avenue. From $3 million in a single day to bankruptcy, so complete he couldn't afford a meal. We are going to look at his accomplishments, his peak and decline. But mostly, we are going to look at the psychology, because that is the only part that matters. Livermore is dead. The market is still here, and you are still trading. So let's figure out why he lost everything. And more importantly, let's figure out if you're walking the exact same path. To understand how Jesse Livermore ended, you have to understand how he began. This is not because his childhood was particularly traumatic. It wasn't, not by the standards of the 19th century. You have to understand it because his origin contains the seed of his destruction. It is 1891. Jesse Livermore is 14 years old. He is one of 7 children born to a poor farming family in Shrewsbury, Massachusetts. His father is a hard man, the kind of man who sees children as unpaid labor. Jesse is small for his age. He is not built for field work. His hands are not meant for shovels. One morning, his father tells him he is done with school. Permanently. There is work to be done. There are acres to tend. The farm needs him. And Jesse Livermore, this scrawny, undersized 14-year-old boy, does something remarkable. He runs away. Not in anger nor rebellion. He simply understands, with absolute clarity, that if he stays on that farm, he will die there. Not physically, perhaps, but something in him will wither and rot. He has 75 cents in his pocket. He walks to the train station. He buys a ticket to Boston. Think about that. 75 cents. Without a plan, without connections or safety net. Just a boy and a gut feeling that there has to be more than this. His first job is at Payne Weber. $5 a week. His title is board boy. If you've never seen a 19th century brokerage office, let me describe it for you. There are no screens or monitors. There are no real-time quotes delivered electronically. Only men with chalk in their hands. Stock prices come in over the ticker tape, that spooling ribbon of paper you've seen in photographs. And the board boys scramble up ladders to write the new numbers on massive blackboards that cover entire walls. Most board boys see numbers. That's it. Digits. Quotations. Information to be transmitted without comprehension. Jesse Livermore saw patterns. He started keeping a notebook. He called it his pencil system. Every day, after the market closed, he would copy down the day's prices. He would look for repetitions. He would look for sequences that appeared over and over again. He didn't know what a support level was. Nobody had invented that term yet. He didn't know about trend lines or moving averages or momentum indicators. He just knew that a stock at $40 didn't move the same way it moved at $50. He knew that certain prices attracted buyers and certain prices repelled them. He knew that the tape, that ceaseless river of numbers, had a rhythm, a grammar, a syntax, and he discovered that if you listened carefully enough, it told you what it was going to do next. Now, I need you to understand something important. We are not talking about a college-educated man with a degree in mathematics. Neither are we talking about a quantitative analyst with a supercomputer. We are talking about a 14-year-old dropout who never took a single class in finance. Livermore was not taught to see patterns. He simply saw them. It was not a skill he developed. It was a faculty he possessed. Like perfect pitch, and like all such gifts, it came with a curse. Because when you are naturally, effortlessly good at something, when winning comes to you without struggle, you never learn how to lose. The bucket shops. If you've never heard of them, don't feel bad. They don't exist anymore, not legally, anyway. But in the 1890s, they were everywhere. Every major city had dozens of them. Here's how a bucket shop works. You walk in. You see a blackboard on the wall with current stock prices. You put down cash, $5, $10, $100, and you bet on whether a particular stock will go up or down. You are not buying the stock. The bucket shop is not executing your order on an exchange. You are simply making a bet with the house. If the stock moves in your direction, you win. The house pays you. If the stock moves against you, you lose. You walk away empty-handed. There are no commissions, no slippage, no delay. The moment the price hits the blackboard, your bet is settled. For a boy like Jesse Livermore, the bucket shops were not gambling dens. They were ATMs. He started with $5, then $10, then $50. Within months, he was betting his entire week's salary. And he kept winning. Not sometimes, or usually. He always did this. The bucket shop owners couldn't figure it out. They watched him trade. He didn't have inside information. He didn't know the company executives. He didn't read newspapers. He just watched the board. And then he would put his money down. And he would collect theirs. They banned him. He grew a beard. He was 16 and came back. They banned him again. He sent in proxies, friends, strangers off the street. They banned him again. By the time Jesse Livermore was 20 years old, he was unwelcome in every bucket shop in Boston. He had made $10,000, roughly $300,000 in today's money, and he had been formally, explicitly, permanently exiled from the only game he knew how to play. Now, let's pause here, because this is where most biographies of Livermore make a critical mistake. They treat his bucket shop dominance as a prologue, a prelude, the minor leagues before the big show. But psychologically, this period was not a prelude. It was the template. Livermore learned how to trade in an environment where execution was instant, where slippage didn't exist, where his edge manifested immediately and without interference. He learned that being right meant winning, that the market paid you promptly and without argument. This is not how the real market works. The real market does not pay you immediately. The real market does not care that you are right. The real market does not settle your bets the moment the price changes. But Jesse Livermore was 20 years old. He had $10,000 in his pocket, and nobody had ever explained this to him. He thought he was ready for New York. He was not. And the crash that followed, the first real crash of his trading career, was not a failure of analysis. It was a failure of adaptation. Jesse Livermore arrived in New York in the spring of 1899. He was 22 years old. He had $10,000 in his account. He had never lost a significant trade in his life. He expected to bleed Wall Street dry. Instead, Wall Street bled him. His first trade was a short sale on a stock called Chicago Great Western. He put down his entire position. He waited for the price to fall. It did, exactly as he predicted. But he didn't get paid. In the bucket shops, when the price hit his target, his profit was credited instantly. In New York, the execution lagged. The tape moved slower than the actual trading floor. By the time his sell order was filled, the price had already bounced. He made money. Barely. But it felt wrong. He tried again. Same result. His timing was perfect, but his execution was compromised. He couldn't figure out why. Here's what Livermore didn't understand. In the bucket shops, he was betting against the house. The house took the other side of his trade, and the house paid him directly when he won. In New York, he was betting against the entire market. His sell order went to a broker, who went to a specialist, who found a buyer. Every step introduced delay. Every step introduced slippage. Every step introduced information leakage. And the worst part? The brokers knew who he was. Livermore had a reputation. The boy wonder. The bucket shop killer. When his orders came in, the floor traders knew exactly what he was doing. They would front-run him. They would push prices against him. They would fill his orders at the worst possible prices. He was not trading against the tape anymore. He was trading against people who had been playing this game since before he was born. Within 6 months, Jesse Livermore was broke. Not, I need to tighten my belt, broke. Not, I'll sit on the sidelines for a while, broke. Broke. Zero. Nothing. He couldn't pay his rent. He couldn't afford meals. He borrowed $5 from his brother-in-law and spent it on a sandwich. This is the part of the story that never makes it into the motivational posters. They don't sell framed prints of Jesse Livermore eating a cold meal in a boarding house, wondering if he's a fraud, wondering if his gift was an illusion, wondering if the bucket shops were easy and he was just too young and arrogant to realize it. But that's what happened. And here's what matters. Livermore didn't lose his money because he was wrong about the market. He was right, repeatedly, consistently, agonizingly right. He predicted the moves. He timed the entries. He did everything correctly, according to the system that had made him rich in Boston. The system failed him, not because the system was broken, because the environment had changed. This is the first great psychological test of any trader's career. You develop a method. It works. You prove it works. You have the bank statements to prove it. You have the confidence that comes from repeated, verifiable success. Then you bring that method to a new context, a larger account, a different instrument, a more volatile market, and it fails. What do? Do you double down? Do you assume that the failure is temporary, that if you just keep executing, the results will return? Do you blame the environment? Do you convince yourself that the market is rigged, that the brokers are cheating you, that the game is fixed? Do you quit? Jesse Livermore did none of these things. He borrowed $500. He returned to the bucket shops, the ones that hadn't banned him yet, or the ones that didn't recognize him in his latest disguise. He rebuilt his stake, one trade at a time, the same way he had done at 14. And then he came back to New York, not with arrogance, not with entitlement, not with the naive confidence of a boy who thinks he's invincible. He came back with a notebook full of observations. He came back with a revised method, adjusted for slippage, adjusted for execution delay, adjusted for the reality of trading against professionals instead of bookies. He came back with the single most important quality a trader can possess: the willingness to admit that he was wrong about how the game works. I want you to remember this, because later, much later, Jesse Livermore would lose this quality. He would become rigid. He would refuse to adapt. He would watch the market change around him while he kept trading the same way he had in 1907. But that was later. Right now, in 1900, Jesse Livermore is 23 years old, and he has just learned the most expensive lesson of his life. He will never forget it. Unfortunately, he will eventually stop applying it. The year is 1907. Jesse Livermore is 30 years old. He has spent the past 7 years refining his method. He has made and lost multiple fortunes, not metaphorically, literally. He has been bankrupt twice. He has been bailed out by friends. He has clawed his way back from zero more times than most traders experience in a lifetime. And now, he sees something that no one else seems to notice. The banks are choking. Credit is tightening. Money is becoming scarce. The financial system, for all its outward confidence, is running on fumes. Livermore reads the tape and sees not individual stock movements, but the movement of money itself. He goes short, not a position, not a bet, a campaign. He sells stocks he doesn't own, betting that prices will collapse. He sells more. He sells until his broker, the legendary Jeff Hutton, pulls him aside and begs him to stop. Livermore does not stop. October 24th, 1907. The market is in freefall. Panic has spread from the brokerage houses to the banks to the streets. Grown men are weeping in their offices. Fortunes are evaporating by the minute. Jesse Livermore closes his positions. In a single day, he makes $3 million. $3 million. In 1907, when the average annual salary was less than $500. He is not a trader anymore. He is a force of nature. He is the great bear of Wall Street. And then J.P. Morgan. The man who single-handedly controls the American banking system sends a messenger to Livermore's office.
Morgan wants you to stop selling. The entire system is at risk. If you keep this up, there won't be a market to trade tomorrow.
I'm not selling anymore. I'm already out.
Then he wants you to not re-enter. He wants you to know that what you did today, it matters. You matter.
Jesse Livermore does not need to be told twice. He covers his remaining shorts. He flips to the long side. He buys stocks to stabilize the market. He is 30 years old, and JP Morgan just acknowledged him as an equal. Now, I need you to understand what this does to a human psyche. Livermore started as a poor farm boy. He ran away with 75 cents. He was banned from gambling parlors. He went bankrupt twice. And now the most powerful financier in American history is asking him, not ordering him, asking him to please stop destroying the economy. If you are Jesse Livermore, sitting in your office on October 24th, 1907, watching the ticker tape slow to a crawl, knowing that you just made $3 million in a few hours and that JP Morgan himself acknowledged your existence, what do you believe about yourself? What do you believe about your abilities? What do you believe about the possibility of failure? The answer, for Livermore, was simple. He believed he was invincible. Not consciously, not in a way he would have admitted, but deep in his viscera, in the part of his mind that made trading decisions without conscious thought. He had crossed a line. He had gone from a man who could beat the market to a man who believed he was the market. And that belief, that subtle, invisible, almost imperceptible shift in identity, would eventually destroy him. 22 years pass. The market booms. The market booms so hard and so long that an entire generation forgets that markets can go down. Stocks are not investments anymore. They are lottery tickets. Shoe shine boys and taxi drivers and housewives all have brokerage accounts. Leverage is unlimited. Margin debt is through the roof. Jesse Livermore is 52 years old. He has been through multiple fortunes, multiple bankruptcies, multiple marriages. He is not the same man who stared down JP Morgan in 1907, but he still reads the tape, and the tape is telling him something terrible. Livermore sees the same pattern he saw in 1907, the same euphoria, the same reckless speculation, the same disconnection between price and value. But this time, he is smarter. He knows that if he places his short orders openly, the market will front-run him. The brokers will talk. The price will move against him before his positions are filled. So he develops a strategy. He splits his sell orders across more than 100 different brokers. He disguises his footprint. He makes himself invisible. And then he waits. October 29th, 1929. Black Tuesday. The market does not crash. It disintegrates. 16 million shares trade hands, a record that will stand for decades. Ticker tape runs hours behind. Brokers don't know if their clients are alive or dead, solvent or bankrupt. The entire financial system of the United States seizes up and stops functioning. And Jesse Livermore is short. We don't know exactly how much he made. The records are incomplete. The estimates range from $50 million to $100 million. But we know this. Livermore's profit from the 1929 crash was so enormous that he had to hire bodyguards. He had to change his daily routines. He had to take precautions against kidnapping, extortion, assassination. He was not just wealthy. He was the wealthiest speculator in the world. Here is the part that never makes it into the books. In 1907, Livermore made $3 million and felt like a king. In 1929, Livermore made $100 million and felt nothing. He didn't celebrate. He didn't throw parties. He didn't buy a bigger yacht or a grander mansion. He just sat in his office, watching the tape, waiting for the next opportunity. The thing he had been chasing his entire life, the fortune, the validation, the proof that he was special, had finally arrived. And it didn't change anything. He was still alone in a room with a ticker tape. He was still trying to predict what millions of strangers would do next. He was still Jesse Livermore, the farm boy who ran away from home. Except now he had more zeros in his bank account than he could count. The money was never the point. The money was just the scoreboard. And when the game stopped being fun, the scoreboard became meaningless. I want to talk about flaws. Not the kind of flaws that make for interesting biography. Not the colorful eccentricities that humanize a legend. I want to talk about the specific, structural, characterological flaws that turn genius into tragedy. Jesse Livermore had 3 of them, and they didn't emerge after he lost his money. They didn't appear when the market turned against him. They were there, fully formed, at the height of his power. They just didn't matter yet. Because when you're winning, nobody asks why you're winning. Nobody examines your psychology. Nobody suggests that the very traits making you successful might eventually destroy you. But they will. They always do. Flaw number 1. Jesse Livermore was addicted to the act of trading. He wasn't addicted to making money, being right, or to the lifestyle that wealth afforded him. He was addicted to the transaction itself, the moment of decision, the rush of execution, the instantaneous feedback of profit and loss. He once wrote, in his private notes, "I cannot sit idle. When I am not trading, I feel as though I am not living." Think about that sentence. When I am not trading, I feel as though I am not living. This is not the statement of a man who uses trading as a profession. This is the statement of a man who uses trading as an identity, as a purpose, as the sole justification for his existence on earth. Here's what that addiction cost him. It cost him patience. Livermore knew, intellectually, that the big money is made by sitting. He said it himself. "It was never my thinking that made the big money. It was always my sitting." But knowing something intellectually and living it are 2 different things. Between 1907 and 1929, Livermore made and lost 4 separate fortunes. 4. This wasn't because he was wrong about the market's direction or because he couldn't sit still. He would establish a winning position, watch it move in his favor, and then, out of boredom, out of restlessness, out of the unbearable discomfort of doing nothing, he would close it early. He would take his profit and move on to the next trade. And then he would watch from the sidelines as the position continued to move without him. I have met traders like this. They sit in front of their screens, waiting for a setup. When the setup appears, they execute. Then the trade moves in their favor, and then they close the trade without taking substantial profit. This don't happen because the thesis has changed, the risk has increased, or because any rational criterion for exit has been triggered. They close the trade because they are uncomfortable with inactivity. They close the trade because they need to feel the dopamine hit of another execution. They close the trade because sitting in a winning position, doing nothing, is psychologically unbearable. Livermore knew this about himself. He wrote about it. He talked about it. He gave speeches warning other traders about it. And then he did it anyway. Because addiction does not respond to knowledge. Addiction responds to abstinence, to structure, to the deliberate imposition of barriers between impulse and action. Livermore never built those barriers. He never stopped believing that he could outsmart his own psychology. And his psychology, like a patient predator, waited for the moment when his guard was down, and then took everything. Flaw number 2. Jesse Livermore, the man who warned a generation of traders never to accept tips, never to trust opinions, never to trade on someone else's analysis, was utterly, catastrophically susceptible to charismatic authorities. The year is 1908. Livermore is at the height of his post, 1907 fame. He has millions of dollars. He has a reputation. He has a method that has proven itself under fire. And he meets Percy Thomas. Percy Thomas is the Cotton King. He is not merely a speculator. He is an analyst. He has written books. He has advised governments. He has forgotten more about the cotton market than Livermore will ever know. Thomas approaches Livermore with a thesis. Cotton is undervalued. Cotton is about to explode higher. The fundamentals, the supply-demand dynamics, the geopolitical factors, all of it points to a massive, sustained rally. Livermore listens. He knows, intellectually, that he should not take tips. He knows that Thomas has an agenda. He knows that Thomas is not a successful trader. Analysts and traders are different species, and the skills of one rarely transfer to the other. But Thomas is so confident, so articulate, so certain. Hence, Livermore buys cotton. Then cotton rallies and Livermore is profitable. Thomas says, "See? I told you. Add to the position." Livermore listens and adds. Cotton rallies more. Livermore is very profitable. Thomas says, "The real move hasn't even started. Double down." Livermore doubles down. And then, without warning, cotton collapses. This wasn't a pullback or a correction, but a collapse. The market turns violently, inexplicably, catastrophically against Livermore's position. He loses everything. Here is the detail that matters. While Livermore was buying cotton, Percy Thomas was selling. Not maliciously, necessarily. Not with conscious intent to deceive. But Thomas was not a trader. He was an analyst. He believed his own thesis, until the market proved him wrong. And when the market proved him wrong, he exited. Livermore, meanwhile, was still buying, still adding, still trusting the authority figure who had convinced him to abandon his own process. He didn't lose money because he was wrong about cotton. He lost money because he outsourced his conviction to someone else. Now, let me ask you something. How many times have you done this? Forget the cotton and stocks talk. But with that Discord group that promises high conviction calls, with that Twitter influencer who has a 73% win rate, with that friend of a friend who knows someone at the firm, you know the statistics. You know that tips are poison. You know that by the time information reaches you, it has already been priced in. And yet, someone with a credential, someone with a title, someone with a confident voice and a compelling narrative tells you that this time is different. And you believe them. Jesse Livermore did the same thing. He did it in 1908 and lost everything. He did it again in the 1930s and lost everything again. He never stopped believing that the right tip, the perfect piece of information delivered by the perfect authority, could replace the hard work of reading the tape himself. It couldn't. It never can. Flaw number 3. This is the big one. This is the one that killed him. Jesse Livermore had no life outside the market, no hobbies that engaged him, no intellectual pursuits that weren't directly related to speculation, no community that didn't revolve around trading, no source of meaning, purpose, or identity that wasn't derived from his P&L. When the market was open, he was alive. When the market closed, he ceased to exist. His first wife, Nettie, divorced him because he was never home. His second wife, Dorothy, divorced him because he was home, but he wasn't present. His body was in the room, but his mind was on the tape. His third wife, Harriet, stayed with him until the end, but by then there was nothing left to stay with. His sons grew up with a father who was either absent or distracted. They didn't know him. He didn't know them. He had yachts he never sailed, mansions he rarely visited, art collections he never looked at. He acquired wealth not because he wanted the things wealth could buy, but because wealth was the scoreboard. Wealth was the validation. Wealth was the proof that he was still special, still gifted, still the boy who saw patterns that everyone else missed. And when the wealth disappeared, when the market stopped validating him, there was nothing left. I want you to think about your own life. Not your trading, not your account balance, not your win rate, your life. What do you have that exists independently of the market? What relationships would survive a total, permanent loss of your trading capital? What activities bring you joy that have nothing to do with charts, indicators, or P&L? If you can't answer these questions, you are walking the exact same path Jesse Livermore walked. And that path does not lead to a comfortable retirement. It leads to a cloakroom in the Sherry Netherland Hotel. The years after 1929 were not kind to Jesse Livermore. Not because he lost money, not immediately, anyway. He still had tens of millions of dollars. He could have retired. He could have walked away. He could have spent the rest of his life on a yacht, watching the sunsets, never looking at another ticker tape. But he didn't. He kept trading, and the market had changed. The Securities Act of 1933, the Securities Exchange Act of 1934, the creation of the SEC, the separation of commercial and investment banking, margin requirements, disclosure rules, 1,000 new regulations designed specifically to prevent another 1929. Livermore didn't understand these changes. He didn't want to understand them. He was 57 years old, and he had been trading the same way for 40 years, and he was not about to learn a new system. He kept shorting rallies. It had worked in 1907. It had worked in 1929. It would work again, he said to himself. But it didn't. The market drifted higher. Slowly, grudgingly, without euphoria, without speculation, without the manic energy that Livermore knew how to exploit. His shorts bled. His longs went nowhere. His edge, the intuitive, almost supernatural ability to sense turning points, had abandoned him. Or maybe it hadn't. Maybe the edge was still there, buried under 40 years of accumulated habits, buried under the arrogance of a man who had been right too many times, buried under the refusal to admit that the game had changed. And then his personal life collapsed. His second marriage, to Dorothy Went, had always been unstable. She was 23 years younger than him. She was a showgirl, a socialite, a woman who wanted to live in the world. Livermore wanted to live in his office. The divorce was brutal, public, and humiliating. Dorothy testified that Livermore had been unfaithful, that he had been absent, that he had given her gonorrhea twice. The settlement cost him $10 million in cash. It also cost him custody of his 2 sons. I don't mention this to scandalize you. I mention it because this is what decline looks like. It's not a single catastrophic event. It's not one bad trade, one margin call, one bankruptcy. It's 1,000 small fractures spreading through every aspect of your life. The money goes, then the relationships go, then the health goes, then the will to continue goes. By 1934, 5 years after making $100 million, Jesse Livermore was broke. Not low on liquidity broke. Not asset-rich but cash-poor broke. Broke. Zero. Nothing. The same condition he had experienced in 1900, in 1908, in 1915. But this time, he was 57 years old. He had been through this cycle 4 times. He knew, with absolute certainty, that he could rebuild again. What he didn't know, what he couldn't admit, was that he didn't have the energy to rebuild again. The hunger was gone. The fire was out. And no amount of trading could relight it. In 1940, Jesse Livermore published a book. It was called How to Trade in Stocks. It was his attempt to codify everything he had learned in 40 years of speculation. His rules, his methods, his philosophy. The book was not a success. The reviews were dismissive. The sales were mediocre. The trading community, what was left of it after a decade of depression and war, had moved on. Livermore was a relic, a ghost from a vanished era, a man whose methods belonged to a market that no longer existed. He took it personally. He had always believed that his legacy would be his ideas, not his money. He had always believed that future generations of traders would study his methods the way artists study the old masters. He had always believed that his suffering, his bankruptcies, his repeated climbs back from zero, all of it would mean something. The book's failure told him otherwise. November 27, 1940. Livermore has dinner with his wife, Harriet, at the Stork Club. He is quiet, distant. She doesn't know what's wrong, or maybe she does, and she's tired of asking. They argue about money, about the future, about the same things they've been arguing about for years. They go back to their apartment at the Sherry Netherland. The argument continues. Livermore retreats to another room. Harriet goes to sleep. November 28, 1940. Livermore wakes early. He dresses carefully. He walks to the cloakroom. He removes his hat. He hangs it on the rack. He sits down on a wooden chair. He takes out a Colt Woodsman .22 caliber pistol. This is the detail that stays with me. The Colt Woodsman was not a dramatic weapon. It wasn't a revolver, wasn't a magnum, wasn't anything you'd see in a gangster film. It was a small, precise, almost delicate firearm, the kind of tool a surgeon might use. Livermore was not a man for grand gestures. He never had been. He was a man for careful, deliberate execution. He placed the barrel against his right temple, and then he pulled the trigger. He left a note for Harriet. 6 handwritten pages. Most of it is mundane. Instructions for settling his affairs, names of people to contact, details about insurance policies. But there is one paragraph that matters. My dear Harriet, I can't go on. Things have been bad with me. I am tired of fighting. Can't carry on any longer. This is the only way out. I am not worth anything. I am a failure. Read that again. I am not worth anything. I am a failure. Not, I don't have any money. Not, my trading account is empty. I am not worth anything. Jesse Livermore did not kill himself because he was broke. He wasn't broke, not technically. He had assets. He had income. He had a book deal and speaking engagements and a lifetime of knowledge that people would pay to access. He killed himself because he had spent 63 years defining his worth exclusively in terms of his trading success. And when his trading success evaporated, when the market stopped validating him, there was nothing left. No identity, no purpose, no reason to continue existing. He didn't lose his money. He lost himself. I've spent hours, years, really, thinking about Jesse Livermore. I've read his book. I've read the biographies. I've read reminiscences of a stock operator so many times that I've memorized entire passages. I've studied his trades, his methods, his rules, and I've come to believe that most of what people say about him is wrong. They say he was a genius who couldn't manage risk. They say he was a brilliant trader who couldn't handle success. They say he was a victim of his own hubris. All of these things are true, but all of them miss the point. Jesse Livermore's story is not about trading. It's about identity. He never asked himself the fundamental question, who am I, independent of the market? He never built a life that could survive a losing streak. He never cultivated relationships that weren't contingent on his success. He never discovered sources of meaning that didn't require a ticker tape. And when the market stopped cooperating, as it always does, for every trader who stays in the game long enough, he had nothing to fall back on. No identity, no purpose, no reason to continue. This is not a cautionary tale about risk management. This is a cautionary tale about what happens when you make trading your entire existence. There are some lessons we must take home today. Lesson 1. God mode is temporary. You will have winning streaks. You will have periods where every trade works, every setup triggers, every position moves in your favor. You will feel invincible. You will believe that you have finally, definitively, permanently figured it out. This is a lie. Not about the winning streak. The winning streak is real. The lie is the permanence. The lie is the belief that because you are winning now, you will always win. Livermore won in 1907. He won in 1929. He won in ways that most traders cannot even imagine. And he still lost everything. Not because he forgot how to trade. Because he forgot that God mode is a rental, not a purchase. It is lent to you by the market, and the market can recall the loan at any time, for any reason, without notice. The question is not whether you can achieve God mode. The question is whether you can survive the inevitable moment when it ends. Lesson 2. Tips kill. I don't care who the tip comes from. I don't care about their track record. I don't care about their credentials. I don't care about the proprietary algorithm they claim to have access to. If you are trading based on someone else's analysis, you are not trading. You are gambling. You are outsourcing your conviction to a stranger whose incentives you do not understand and whose process you cannot verify. Livermore knew this. He said it 100 times in 100 different ways. And then he met Percy Thomas, the Cotton King, and he threw every principle out the window. Why? Because tips are seductive. They offer certainty in an uncertain environment. They promise that someone, somewhere, has figured out the puzzle, and if you just listen to them, you can skip the hard work of figuring it out yourself. It's a lie. It was a lie in 1908. It is a lie today. Lesson 3. You need a life outside the charts. This is the hardest lesson. This is the one most traders refuse to learn. You need something in your life that exists independently of the market, not as a distraction, not as a break from trading, not as a way to recharge your batteries so you can trade better. Something that matters. Something that would still matter if you never placed another trade. Livermore had nothing. He filled his life with yachts he didn't sail, mansions he didn't inhabit, marriages he didn't tend. He surrounded himself with objects and people that were supposed to prove his success, and then he ignored them. He had no idea how to live. He only knew how to trade. If you are watching this and your entire identity is wrapped up in your P&L, you are not a trader. You are an addict. And your addiction, like all addictions, will eventually demand everything you have. Lesson 4. Protect your mind as fiercely as your capital. Livermore had strict rules for capital preservation. He never risked more than a certain percentage on any single trade. He never averaged into losing positions. He never let a loss run beyond his predetermined stop. He had no rules for psychological preservation. He didn't recognize that a losing streak is not just a drawdown in capital. It is a drawdown in confidence, in clarity, in the emotional stability required to make rational decisions. He didn't recognize that revenge trading is not a strategy, it's a symptom. He didn't recognize that the impulse to get even is the most dangerous force in a trader's psychology, more dangerous than greed, more dangerous than fear. He didn't recognize these things because he never built the infrastructure to recognize them. He never journaled his emotional state. He never reviewed his psychological patterns. He never sought feedback from anyone who could see what he couldn't see about himself. He protected his capital. He let his mind fend for itself. Finally, listen. Livermore wrote, "It was never my thinking that made the big money for me. It was always my sitting." He understood this intellectually. He knew that the vast majority of his profits came from a handful of trades that he held for weeks, months, sometimes years. He knew that the constant in and out, the endless churn of small winners and small losers, was not just unprofitable, it was actively destructive. And still he couldn't stop. Because sitting is hard. Sitting requires patience. Sitting requires faith. Sitting requires tolerating uncertainty without the anesthetic of constant action. Sitting requires you to be comfortable with who you are when you are not doing anything. Livermore was not comfortable with who he was. He was only comfortable when he was trading. And that comfort, that false comfort, that temporary relief from the burden of being himself, cost him everything. Jesse Livermore died on November 28, 1940. He was 63 years old. He had made and lost 4 fortunes. He had been the most feared speculator on Wall Street. He had been broke, bankrupt, and humiliated more times than most traders experience in a lifetime. And through it all, he never stopped believing that the next trade would fix everything. The next trade was always going to be the one. The next winning streak. The next fortune. The next validation. It never came, because the validation was never in the P&L. The validation was never in the account balance. The validation was never in the numbers on the tape. Livermore was searching for something that trading could never give him. He was searching for proof that he was worthy of existing, and he died without ever finding it. I don't know why you started trading. I don't know what you're looking for. I don't know what hole in your life you're trying to fill with green days and winning streaks and the temporary relief of a profitable trade. But I know this. Whatever it is you're searching for, it's not on the tape. The tape doesn't care about you. The tape doesn't know you exist. The tape is just a record of what millions of strangers decided to do with their money today. It contains no messages. It offers no validation. It provides no evidence of your worth as a human being. You bring all of that with you. You bring your hunger, your fear, your desperate need to prove that you are not the person you're afraid you might be. And the tape reflects it back at you, distorted and magnified, until you can't tell the difference between the market and your own psychology. Jesse Livermore never learned to tell the difference. He spent 40 years trying to conquer the market, never realizing that the real enemy was sitting on his side of the ticker tape. Don't make the same mistake. This is losing trader psychology. We don't celebrate wins here because wins lie to you. We study the losses because the losses tell the truth. If this video resonated with you, if you've ever felt the weight of a losing streak pressing down on your chest, if you've ever wondered whether you're a trader or just someone who can't stop trading, subscribe, leave a comment. Tell me about your hardest loss. Not the dollar amount, the feeling. What did you lose that you couldn't get back? I go through every comment, not because I have answers, because we're all trying to figure this out together. And maybe, if we pay attention, we can learn from Livermore's losses without repeating them. See you next time.